memoirs of Nimrod, tracking devices inside your SIM card. The all-seeing iPhone they use to spy on the masses of the people consumed inside of this cyclone. If my poems can challenge what you rely on, then find another bed to go and lie on. They screaming out. I hear them yelling.
This is the Third Person View podcast by Rohan Agarwal and Prakhar Varshney, chronicling the state of affairs.
Hey guys, welcome to the very first episode of the Third Person View podcast. The name of today's episode is Mania Parcae. Prakhar, you wanna explain what that means?
For sure. So, mania, as most of you you can guess, you can know, means excessive in a type of
Like next level, sort like maniac, next level. And Parcae
yes.
means
Parcae. Go ahead.
It's the personification of the female like figure of fate, right? Like in the Greek culture. So basically this is just sort of a play on the sort of doctrine that we want to talk about today called manifest destiny.
Okay, boom. So
Okay.
you were explaining what do you call it? Sorry for the technical difficulties. Just had a little bit of a mic error there. So you were explaining Mania Parcae and Manifest Destiny, like the links between it. So go ahead.
Yeah, so Mania Parcae is basically just play on manifesting destiny. And manifesting destiny is actually a type of doctrine, if you will, adopted by the settlers in North America when they just first landed, right? So the dictionary definition, or like the definition of manifesting destiny, if you search it up, is it's a widely held cultural belief in the 19th century United States that its settlers were destined to expand across North America. And there are three basic themes to manifesting destiny: the special virtues of the American people and their institutions, the mission of the United States to redeem and remake the West in the image of agrarian America, and irresistible destiny to accomplish this essential duty. All right.
So this concept might sound, like super complicated, this, that. Essentially, it just means that we must spread our culture, our beliefs, our values in a very colonialist, or not colonialist, I guess an imperialist sense.
It's very imperialist. It's very
duty.
scary, to be honest.
Definitely.
I mean, like if you think about it, if you look at the actions of the U.S. government in today's day and age, their actions very, very closely match this specific doctrine. I mean, if you look at the expansion of the U.S., the expansion in air quotes, and like the invasion of these Middle East countries, right? That the U.S. has invaded these Middle East countries, right? They have expanded, right? They have expanded in a sense. They have spread their virtues.
Yeah,
right?
And it's not even as this is all in the interest of America. It's about people laugh, they joke the idea like, oh, making America great, it's like a recent idea or something, but this has always been a kind of idea, a theme, and it's really, you can really see it in the concept of manifesting destiny. It's this idea that we must make America the greatest. It must spread everywhere. We must be everywhere. And it's crazy that it's happening in the Middle East. And although it's more indirect, they're not establishing themselves there. They're not saying this is American land. They're definitely invading in order to push their own interest and advance their own advance their own self-interest,
their own mission. And the funniest thing is, in this doctrine, it says the mission of the United States is to redeem and remake the West in the image of agrarian America. But the thing is, America isn't agrarian anymore. It's a capitalistic machine, right? And it's not just the West. America, in the most sense, is pretty much international at this point, right? And if you look at this doctrine, not with the context of it being written in the 18th, in the 19th century, but if you look at this doctrine in the context of today, America, it conveys, it more or less conveys that America wants to spread their values everywhere across the world. It could be like, Prakhar, this is something that me and you have talked about before, right? We sort of came across this thing on Wikipedia, and we sort of made our own sort of interpretation. We interpreted it our own way, right? We said modern imperialism is not an imitation of American consensus, but of dissent in the national political parties. So that, like,
Oh,
pretty much, yeah,
100%.
yeah. I mean, like,
Because like
if you,
you can see it, you think about historically, even I think the first war, or the first I guess you could say invasion in the United States that was really publicly protested was the Vietnam War itself. The consensus for the longest time was clearly against it. Millions of people out in the streets, and since then, since the 1969, since 1970s until today, there's this similar idea where America invades all of these countries, all of these foreign nations, and the consensus, their own American people themselves, they're not aligned with the same idea. They're actually opposed to it because
yeah.
it's true. Why are you interfering?
And the funniest thing is, no, actually, the funniest and the scariest thing is, it might not only be present in the form of invasions, like direct invasions. Let's take the Cold War, for example. Not barely any, the American military wasn't involved, but it was still an active sort of war the US was fighting. And the thing is, the US brainwashed all of these people into believing that, like, oh, commies are bad. They want to come and like mess up our ideologies. They want to come here and destroy our way of living, right? But if you
Mm,
look just before that, before the US started its anti-Russia, anti-USSR propaganda, right?
mm,
The American public had no problem with them, because in fact Russia, the USSR in that time, sorry, had actually helped them win World War II. Without Russia and US together in World War II, attacking on two completely different fronts, right? It wouldn't have happened. I mean, like, you get what I'm saying, right?
I understand. I understand. I'm not too sure about the exact historical facts surrounding before pre World War II and post World War II, specifically the Cold
Yeah,
War. But I do
yeah,
know for sure that the Cold War, and I think since then, it's because you see, it's very easy and it's very obvious to spot, a direct invasion. Troops on the ground, missiles, aircrafts, tanks, artillery, being sent
yeah,
into a foreign nation to
yeah,
protect some sort of national interest that America, the government, has. But it's more about an ideological sort of warfare, and
yeah,
it's
yeah,
not. And even the invasions that they do with force, it is not as clear. There's always a justification, some sort of rationale. There's always something. There's a line someone can say. I think I remember, because this is something I've studied up on a little. In the Iraq War in 2003, it was always about weapons of mass destruction, and then it was about protecting the rights of the Iraqi people from Saddam Hussein and his very authoritarian and very torturous reign over Iraq, where thousands of citizens, and they keep bringing up all these different points when one point gets disproven, because they never actually they looked after 2003 when the invasion of Iraq happened, and there was barely any evidence to suggest that weapons of mass destruction actually
yeah,
existed.
yeah,
Maybe there was a narrative, but they didn't actually exist. So then they were like, "Oh, we're protecting the human rights of these people," and
yeah.
it's just pretty crazy. That's
There's
why we're
another
saying
thing.
Mania Parcae.
Yeah, another thing, Parker. Just your opinion, really. I just want your opinion, and your just knowledge. All right. When was the last time the US has initiated a war where the the majority of the general population has been behind it, and has not been initiated in the interest of some old warbirds and the government.
That's actually see, that's the thing. I think in any country in the world, as far as because though I might not know about the US too much, in specific, in particular, I think in general, the consensus is that the people of a country don't want to go to war. I mean, why would they, right? It's their families, it's their sons, their brothers, their sisters that are going to be ravaged. It's their buildings that are going to be destroyed. It's
And it's
all
ironic because the only people who benefit from war are capitalists.
exactly. It's all a machine. It's all
Yeah.
a machine. Like, I mean, we laugh at this system, but it's messed up. It's terribly, excuse my French, screwed up. I mean, this is a thing. It's almost an emergent pattern, and you can especially see it with the United States, all these invasions into, especially the Middle East in recent history. You talk about Iraq. You even talk about today. You talk about something like the Yemen crisis. What very few
Yeah.
people try to focus on. I mean, obviously, what's happening there is a tragedy. A once beautiful nation, and now there's 80% of the population, I believe, reading a statistic like that, 80% of the population needs aid to even survive anymore. You see these, and it's terrible, it's a tragedy. But what a lot of people don't seem to realize is that the United States, more specifically, even the Trump administration, and even I think the end of the Obama administration, they actively support Saudi Arabia in its how do you say this, like uh yes,
Crusades.
it's
the
crusades is a good way to
the
put it.
monarchs of Saudi Arabia, their own personal crusades. They support the monarchs for their own personal interests. The US supports the monarchs of Saudi Arabia because they get oil out of it, and Saudi Arabia takes that support because what do they get out of it? They get power, money, weapons.
Yeah,
It's
it's just, it's so interesting. It's so interesting, right? You look at this entire thing, and you know what you realize. um
what.
I'm right here. I'm reading an article from the Guardian real quick. It says,
Mm-hmm.
and this was published just October 3rd, 2019. So it's recent information on the Yemen crisis. The Yemen crisis, by the way, for most of you don't know, was like officially kind of deemed a crisis in 2015, although it's only recent news. But
Like
anyways,
this
in
year, like
2019, they're reporting
yeah,
America.
in the last week, it was deemed the greatest humanitarian crisis the world has faced.
Yes. And you can see even this and this is a direct quote. American complicity in the Yemen war goes beyond providing training and intelligence support and selling billions of dollars in weapons to the UAE and Saudi Arabia, which has become Washington's largest weapon buyer. And you look at these balance the power, help the people. These are all
It's crazy.
rhetorics.
It's crazy. And like
But
another thing that like sort of like, yeah, sorry about that. As I was saying, if you look at Yemen as a country and just look at Middle East as a whole, let's look at Middle East as a whole. The eastern part, the northeastern part of the African continent, and where it meets like the Middle East, like that whole area has been around the longest. It has like that entire area has basically housed humans, has had humans for the longest period of time, right? And the funniest thing is that if these people were able to survive for so long without any conflict, building beautiful cities, developing beautiful culture, being able to practice religion, and without all of these things that that it's being affected by now, right? It really makes you question how big of a hand other powers, other countries have over the Middle East. Like, for
mm,
example, if we take um if like I don't know if you guys I don't know Prakar, we talked about this earlier as well. There's a couple of pictures circulating social media of before and after pictures of Yemen, right? Before it was the before picture uh, portrays a beautiful city, like it like looks architecturally amazing, and it's just beautiful.
Hmm.
And the after picture shows just like ruins, the same city, I presume, the same buildings have been ruined, bombed, destroyed, desecrated in a sense.
I
And
think, you know what, I partially agree with you, for sure, but I don't see a lot of these crises. They initially do start off because of the fault of the country itself. It's understandable. Like, there has been a very well established order, especially since, you're right. There has been a very well long standing established order and almost balance of power in the Middle East for a very, very long time. However, as of recently, even the Yemen crisis, it was started on its own. It was a yes, it did. Obviously, it's not like America is coming in here and starting the problem. I feel like
I'm just
a
saying
way
that
to
America did have a pretty big helping hand
yes,
in getting,
100%.
in progressing Yemen's already big humanitarian crisis into the biggest humanitarian crisis the world has ever faced. Like
Yes,
that's what I
that's
find
what I was
messed
about
up.
to say. It sets it's how do you what's the phrase, like, stokes the flames, or like
Stokes the
puts
flame.
gas on the flames.
Exactly, exactly. It encourages um, all the stuff it encourages all the bad elements of Yemen by providing them like money, weapons, and all of that stuff, like you said before, right? And
It's
yeah,
just, and you look at and see, this is the funny thing. It's not, well, not funny obviously, but it's, you look at this and it's very, very glaringly obvious that civilian casualty is not even collateral damage.
it's just
you
part
know
of the
um
damage. It is like intended,
it is, yes.
intended. It's
And
fully
all
intended.
these other
Sorry.
countries all these other countries, who are giving this aid, these Western powers, you can include, because I can read here right now, again from the Guardian article, that there's UN reports being cited, accountability for war crimes committed in Yemen over the last 5 years. These reports, they said third states that have influence on Yemen's warring parties, including the U.S., Britain, France, and Iran, may be held responsible for providing aid or assistance for the commission of international law violations, because that's what they're doing. They're giving these. There's, again, the Washington's largest weapon buyer, the Saudi Arabia, all right, they are causing these issues. They're just as complicit in the fact that they're selling them so many weapons,
It is
so many.
crazy. It is crazy, especially with a country with what, 2 trillion now in military funding.
Are you talking about the U.S. or which
The
country in
U.S. The U.S.
specific?
Sorry, talking about the U.S. I'm talking about U.S. who has $2 trillion in military funding, and this big of a like this country who's so military active, probably who has the most advanced weapons in the world because of their military spending, right? Selling their tech and their like their armory to countries like Saudi Arabia. Another thing, and like it is pretty messed up. But I think, uh, like another thought just came to me, and I'd like to move this on if this is all right with you, Proctor.
Go ahead,
Um,
man, because
is
this is
that
about
like,
everything.
yeah, we can like go off on a tangent here, right? I mean, the US is just this is like a theory I have, right? The US is just an extension of the UK,
What
right?
do you mean?
Like
What are you saying?
the US was found by Christopher Columbus, right? Like he discovered the US, right? And then
Rediscovered.
after, like, huh? rediscovered. Yes,
rediscovered. You know what
like
I mean?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Like, but he's the one who landed from like Europe. He was from Europe, and like from Europe, right? He
Mm.
landed in the US, right? And then after he landed in the US, everyone started immigrating there. Pilgrims, people from Europe, Britain, the England, from Spain, right? Those were the two main countries, Spain and England, right?
Mm.
Sorry, is that Britain? Britain, the UK would be better. Sorry, right?
You
So,
can. I think Britain was the great like British kingdom. I
all
guess
right, all right,
colonies of England. That was what it was.
colonies of
British
England.
America.
Yeah.
British America.
So, um, when when those people went over there, fast forward like a century, right? And then they're like, we want our freedom, right? We want our freedom. And this was just around, this was like 2 centuries before, and then they got their freedom. The US got their freedom, right? And this was around 2 centuries before the UK had to basically give up all their colonies, right? Because it was just recognized by the world. The UK basically owned the entirety of Asia minus Russia, the entirety of Asia and Africa minus Asia. I mean, sorry, minus Russia.
They did control a
Yeah.
significant portion of the
So
world. Yes.
we can. It is pretty safe to say that the UK is probably the most imperialistic country in the history of the world, right?
Yeah, I think
So
it was. I think it's the largest
safe to say,
colony ever.
yeah. So
Hmm.
what if the people who immigrated from Europe, like England or Britain, to the US had these imperialistic values and ideals,
Mm.
ideal ideas, I, ideas like
I
so
understand.
yeah, so subtly ingrained into their psyche that it is still in play. Like the US is just a wannabe UK, is a wannabe like Britain
Whatever.
in a sense, because they are basically, could you say like carrying on Britain's legacy, because Britain can't really colonize anything anymore, but the US
I mean,
technically is
see, I
doing
don't
it
think.
now.
See, I don't think at least overtly anyone can colonize anything anymore. But it is
Yeah,
very interesting that you bring that up because it's kind of like when it just makes sense, right? These people, it's the same people, by the way, essentially, and it's the same. You're right. It would be the same values. It could be carried down the same way, and you can, I guess, again, it's just like speculation or whatever, but you can like kind of see it in the patterns that are emerging today. This again, these whole rationales, these whole invasions, whether during the Cold War, whether during the Middle East in recent history, it's all very subtly self-interest advancing. It's all very subtly, they still
yeah.
have this whole little manifest destiny thing going in them, right?
And the thing is, like, the reason why the US hadn't been shut down before because of these values is because it's because of the context. The UK was shut down. Was shut down because they were seen as the oppressors, right? But the US couldn't be possibly shut down because they were the victims. They were the victims of the UK's like rule. They were the ones who got the freedom from Britain, right?
Mhm.
Do you get what I'm saying?
I understand, and more than that, there's always this narrative. Okay, I remember, again, I know a lot about the Iraq War. I'm sorry, but there was always this narrative that there was always this narrative by Bush that they are liberating the Iraqi people from an oppressive regime. So they're not the oppressors, they're the liberators. But at the same time, like, hey, let's advance our oil interests and let's make a lot of money selling weapons to
let's
these,
not get into let's not
anything
get
else.
into the the
Maybe later.
political language used by US politicians, because that's a whole different rabbit hole to go down. That's like a whole different, that's like, that's really manipulative, and that's a thing for a different time, right? We'll come
Mm,
back to this. But it is really scary to think that this might have actually happened, because then things like systemic problems, systemic racism, systemic Islamophobia, systemic um, like systemic homophobia suddenly makes so much more sense, doesn't it?
How so?
Because if you think about it, the only people in the world who were opposed to these things were the like Christians, like the straight up Christians, right? Like all the Native Americans were cool with this. They were cool with homophobia, and
Oh,
they were cool with the sexualities, and just like people of color. Same thing in India and Africa. There was never disputes over sexualities, and it was all of these countries held a very positive outlook on all these big problems in the world now, right? But the thing is that all changed after the UK went and colonized their country, and basically was like, what are you guys doing? This is not God's way. It's supposed to be like this. Yeah, cool, I'm back. Sorry.
all right. So what I was about to say, man, it's like I can't I don't know about how, I guess the way to say, like Indian Americans, or I don't really know about that, or Africa, but I can for sure, knowing about India, before the British Raj, um at least with transsexuals or cross dressing, it was actually a common part,
it
or
was
it
it
was
was
very
no, the
commonly
thing is,
seen
it was not very
in
common
India.
esteem. It was esteemed. It was a high level in the social hierarchy. These people
Mm,
were called hijras. But now, but before
yeah.
the British Raj, hijras had a very, very positive connotation. They were at the same level of social hierarchy as Brahmins.
Yeah,
But
which is
after
pretty.
the British Raj, the word hijra like adopted a very, very negative connotation. It is used as like a slur in today's day and age against gay people, against transgender people. And it's like very sad to think that that's how powerfully the British Raj really brainwashed us Indians. And if they had the ability to brainwash us so powerfully, just imagine what they did to the rest of the world, because they effectively controlled more than half of the world at a certain point.
It's an interesting narrative to think about for sure. And I think even today, just the prevalence of at least what I can see, at least what I can confirm, there's a really strong see, like in America, or just with American people,
Yeah,
you're like American, you've hung out with like American people, like
yeah,
about
yeah,
this, like they don't really care about what's happening in any other country but America,
yeah.
but everywhere else in the world really cares about America. It's like this, or just the Western world in general.
They're like
You're talking
the popular people, and everyone
about
wants
Britain.
to know
Yes,
what's
yes,
going
yes, yes.
on in
They're like
their
the popular
life.
kid in class, you know?
Yeah, yeah,
Exactly. There's been this recent for the longest time, because I remember this even growing up. I think even until 2018 or 2019, as recently as that. I remember growing up in school, being a kid, we go to international school, so we're really exposed to that. The overarching culture at play, the overarching ideals and values that you were kind of exposed to, or you were kind of taught, or you were kind of surrounded by 24/7, was about America. Everything is about American news. That's like international news. It's funny they say international news. It's so dominated by America, right? Where's the international news about countries in Africa? Where's the international news about countries in Southeast Asia, right? It's not
yeah,
that
yeah.
often that you hear
It's
about these things,
scary.
especially as a young person.
They're like the center of attention, like Britain was when they controlled half of the world, because they had to be in the
See,
center
this
of
is what I'm saying.
attention.
It's so interesting. It's on an ideological front. These days you can't walk into not walk into, yeah, I guess walk into, you can't walk into a country with, more guns or more troops, this or that, whatever, and be like, hey, I'm taking over, this is my house now. This is,
Yeah,
it's kind of
yeah.
it's
Only
and
America
I
can do
think the
that.
Cold War, well, I mean, even that, not really.
Yeah,
Again, it's not a reflection of the American consensus. I don't think this
yeah.
imperialism is.
Again,
um
American imperialism is not a reflection of American consensus, merely a dissent in the national political party.
mm, yeah, and it's like, so what they oh, I kind of forgot what I was gonna say, man. I guess I was gonna
That's
talk about,
that's
like,
actually
yes,
fine, dude.
the Cold War.
Oh,
The Cold War. It was gonna. The Cold War kind of proves that there was this, interesting transition where now it's more about like an ideological infection. Like, for example, during the Cold War, all right, this is so interesting to me. The moon, the lunar race, however you can say, it was
the space
so
race.
important. The space race, yes.
Yeah,
It was so
lunar race.
important to the USSR, and it was so important to the USSR or the US to get there first, right? And it's like it was a propaganda. It was like, we're better than you. It's
Yeah,
all started to become about, it didn't become about, hey, let's send missiles to the USSR and let's blow them to smithereens.
yeah,
It was about, it's about, hey, let's make everyone, we're the better ones. We're,
yeah,
more advanced. We're this, that. And it was clear propaganda was the main vehicle of war with a lot of these. That's why it was called a Cold War. Nobody was actually like, the US and the USSR. It was either propaganda and all of these ideological warfares, or it was proxy wars, which kind of proves, right? Which kind of proves this idea that, there's this general shifting trend. You can't be so overtly imperialistic, even though you might have those ideals.
yeah. And like you've made very, very valid points. And but the thing is, what just keeps coming to my mind is that it just keeps on going back to to Britain, like a couple of centuries ago. Like that's what really scares me in today's day and age, is that all of the negative ideology and negative things that have come, that are coming out of governments these days, can pretty much be traced back to what the Brits have done to the entire world. I mean, like, no hate to the current Brits right now. It's not your fault. It's just that what happened. The thing is, like, the Brits, the British government's doctrine was very clear cut from the beginning. Like like 6 centuries ago, 7 centuries ago, they wanted to colonize every part of the world, and they did do that because they are a tiny country. I mean, like, no
I
offense.
mean, I mean, yeah, like, fair enough. Um, See, it was just the scale which they did it at was ridiculous. And I'm trying to look right now, if I can find like a rationale for the British Empire. I'm sure, I mean, obviously, like a very obvious one, like you need more raw materials, you need more resources, more people, more power,
Yeah,
more money,
yeah.
and like, but there's a,
It was just a
you're
power
right.
struggle,
I
if you
mean,
think, like a power sort of complex. Like, I need to feel powerful because they're a tiny ass country. I mean, like, they're like, they compared to all the countries they've taken over, they're like a speck.
I mean, 100%. And you know what's like, it's pretty crazy, right? Um, oh man, I keep blanking. But I'm sorry, man. Go ahead.
Nah, no worries, no worries. Yeah. So before we kind of went off on another tangent here, I was sort of talking about the systemic problems, right? And how, like, we kind of
Mhm.
went off on a tangent there, but that's cool because, like, we kind of got deeper insight into the background, into like the influence the British Raj, the British have had on the governments of the world, right? And that kind of gives us another aspect into um, systemic problems in today's day and age.
Oh, you know what? This is so interesting. I want to mention this, all right? And it's so pertinent to
Okay,
your point. I'm so sorry to
all right,
interrupt.
no
I've been
worries.
so recently I've been doing like an online course or whatever, no sponsorship or anything. I've been doing an online
Uh-huh.
course on Coursera
Uh-huh.
or whatever. But like if you
Yeah.
want to sponsor us, it's cool. Anyways,
Okay. Yeah.
so it's like an introduction to English common law. And
Mm-hmm.
like that's all fine and dandy. I'm understanding shit. Um when I was they were teaching everyone about the history and about the impacts of the English common law. And the thing is, this common law system, it was pioneered in England. And when you
Ah.
look at many countries
Ah.
today, right, they have this common law system in them. So like look at
This is
Australia,
this is a
the
proof.
United
This is
States
proof.
itself has a common law system in it. India was influenced by it and has a mixed system between a common law system and a civil law system. And there's all these little indicators, all right? There's all these little things you can see. It's like, wow, this really came from here. Like
This really
you can
shows
trace it back, right? Because
this is actually really cool because this really does showcase the influence the British Empire had on every single government, and as such every single country it has invaded would be too harsh, occupied.
yeah, I mean, and you know what's really interesting? The other system of law, right? Civil law. The reason the rest of the countries in the world, nearly the rest of the entire world, apart from the US, UK, and a couple of mixed systems like India, the reason it's so common in the rest of the world is because of the Roman Empire from way long ago, from like 2000 years ago. They were the ones who came up with civil law, and their expansion, their sort of moving trade routes here and there, their influence caused that. So it's very interesting. You can establish these patterns. You can see the same thing. Places which are occupied, which establish these trade routes, no wonder they will be influenced by these ideas. And you can even like it's included in the concept. The people talk like globalization is a recent idea, but I would say like mass globalization or easier globalization
What do you
is a new idea.
what's the difference between, like, in your eyes? I didn't understand the division between globalization and mass or easy
See,
globalization.
I think until very recently, until the advent of these advanced travel technologies, such
Hmm.
as a plane, such as better, faster boats, during the Industrial Revolution of the 1870s,
Just like the
or
modern era,
around that, yes,
before the modern era.
around the creation of the modern era, right before it,
Uh-huh.
right? So these sort of inventions, and including, you can talk about the telephone, the calls, right? They made traveling to other countries, this, that, very, very easy and very, very accessible. And, more than ever today, right? It's so easy and, well, not during the current situation,
Yeah.
but, like today in
Um,
general, it's more than ever, it's easier
so the
to travel
modern era
around.
has given the facilities to all these countries to more easily globalize.
Well, that wasn't my point, but like what I was saying was, I think I was talking about like prior globalization. I think there was always trade routes, right? And though they might have been
Hmm.
slow, though they might have, not been as accessible or as greatly thought of, it was all it's globalization, right? People are moving around the world, and in the modern definition, in the actual definition of globalization, they include the transfer of ideas.
All right, we're back. Okay,
All right.
so as I was saying before, an example I can think of straight off the top of my head is Marco Polo and the Silk Route, the Silk Road. I
Yes, the Silk
mean,
Road.
that was like, if you think of it, a bunch of like gunpowder originated in China, and then it made its way from China to Europe, and then that was just like a breakthrough in Europe, right? I mean, like, wars got easier, right, and more advanced.
Yeah.
um Same thing with tea. Tea became a huge commodity with the trading aspect of the British Empire. And I do think, yeah, building on that, I feel that Britain have had the greatest scope, like the great, like they were the people who could have globalized the easiest. They had the greatest, they had all the opportunities available to them. They had the time, they had the freedom, they had so many different opportunities over centuries to globalize themselves, but they didn't take the bait. They didn't really go for it. They stuck to their own ideologies. And personally, I think that was what caused the downfall of the British Empire in like
Whoa,
both.
whoa, whoa. Wait. So wait, I'm not sure if I really got it. You're saying so what do you mean by Britain didn't take the opportunity to globalize or like their potential?
Britain was the one country, like was the one empire that could travel basically anywhere in the world. They wanted to go to Russia, boom, they were there. They wanted to go to Africa, boom, they were there. They had established trade routes, boom. I mean, like they wanted to go to India, boom, they were there. And again, established trade routes. They wanted to go to China, boom, they could establish trade routes. They wanted to go to the US, bam, they had a colony there. They wanted to go to Canada, boom, they had another colony there. They wanted to go to this to South America, boom, they could. They had colonies there, right? So effectively, the one country that had the greatest, that could travel the most, right,
Mm.
was Britain, right? And it all like went from London. London was like the center, right? Britain was the center. All the trade routes ended or started there, right? So effectively, these guys had the greatest scope for globalization, but they never did. They never globalized. They never assimilated,
Uh,
right?
well, see, it
Come on.
depends on what you see. That's what I was thinking. Like it depends on what you're defining as globalization. Are you meaning like the people of Britain didn't move into these other countries, or what are you trying
No,
to say here?
I'm saying is that instead of embracing other ideologies and other cultures,
Oh,
Britons
they impose their
shunned,
own
they
onto
imposed their own.
others.
They didn't
Yes,
assimilate.
yes, yes,
They
yes.
took their one culture and tried to impose it
Ah,
everywhere. Instead of,
I perfectly understand, and you're very right about that.
yes, yes. So they had the greatest scope of globalization, but the fact that they didn't, and they tried to impose their own and and impose a sort of like one empire under the British, one British empire where everything is the same, is what caused their
Everything, yeah,
downfall. Because
because that's just
if
not
they
how
had
people work,
globalized,
right?
yeah, if they had embraced the culture, if they had, I know there are two words for this. One means that they've forced their culture onto someone, and one means they've like melded.
Wait, hold on.
Yeah, search that up real quick.
Like you mean are you saying assimilation where so assimilation is where the minority culture is fully absorbed into the majority culture, and
Yes,
acculturation is when the minority culture changes but it is still able to retain its unique like
yes,
language,
that
food,
is what I
customs,
am
ideas.
saying. That is what I'm saying.
Mm.
Instead of acculturing the world, the British Empire assimilated. That's what caused them to lose popular support. Okay, if they didn't assimilate, like these are the things, if they didn't assimilate their culture and instead acculturated everything, the world would be a melting pot of religion, culture, and just ideals and government. Like think of it. Think of how the world would be if the British were open-minded. And
We're
like this
really
is no
making them look like the
disrespect.
bad guys.
I mean, like, I'm not going to
But I
lie,
understand.
they were, but if they had taken the chance at globalization and actually tried to create a meaningful empire, imagine where the world would be now. I just
No,
feel
but that's the
that,
thing. That's why you have to
yeah, sorry.
think what their motivations was behind this. And you look at Britain, and even you can link it back to America. It's not about as much as that would be super cool. And even with other colonial powers in the past, whether that be the Spanish, whether that be the Dutch, whether that be the French, throughout history, um you know how do you say, like will you look at these patterns, but colonialism always existed. It's just the way in which
Yeah.
this occurred. Again, you're 100% right. Like there was such an opportunity for this beautiful idealistic world where we all got under one like happy British government or something, and everyone was like allowed to be themselves and like acculturate. But it's about the motivations, dude. They didn't come to India to learn about us. They didn't come to you know they didn't come to Africa or anything like that for any sort of cultural enrichment. Um, they came there for resources. They came there for their own self-interest, and it's very similar. It's the same thing that's happening today. It's the same thing that we see in America. It's this. It's about self-interest, man. It's about
Yeah.
it's this
Yeah.
obsessive kind of thing where hence Mania Parcae.
Yeah.
It's this
That's
obsessive
so
kind
cool.
of
I mean, like
manifestation.
I just think it's so cool.
I know. I mean, again, it's all like kind of a theory, but it's like
Yeah.
it's just it just makes sense, right? You kind of like you can put the pieces together, whatever, and you can see
Like,
certain things, like for sure.
yeah, like,
And
so
you
we
put these
started
together,
this
and you
we
can see it.
started this episode off with talking about the American ideology of manifesting destiny. And now we've talked, and we've sort of just discussed, and we've kind of come to the conclusion that um, the British Empire had pretty much the same thing, right? And we kind of just
Mhm.
discussed the pros and cons of it. And I think like we ended up in a really nice spot where we discussed the influence of government in our world, and the influence countries have on each other, and where these very common ideologies, you could say, have come from. And I think this is a good place to leave this episode off, because I think we've made a full circle and we've covered everything that we needed to. So I think it's pretty cool what we've done here, and I'm pretty, and we have more waiting for you next episode. Trust me,
Oh,
this
one hundred
this
percent.
yeah, this next episode is going to be great. So what we do is that, like, we have series where each series is about one thing, and each series has 3 episodes. So this is just the first, and like each series has like a general theme, and each episode builds on each other. This is just the first episode. We're going to build on this. It's going to become more interesting, and i I really do feel that this is going to give you a better world view, you know.
Oh, 100%. I think it's just about it's just interesting conversation. I don't think,
Yeah.
everyone always, I don't think young people, I think personally, like, sure, it's nice to be updated on current events, current affairs, but like watching the news, it's just so taxing, right? You feel
it's
kind of like I don't want to be here. I don't,
it's yeah, it's I have a
it
great euphemism for this. It's like these news channels are fighting for your attention using your own personal biases.
yo, kind of true, man. But it's like,
Yeah.
I think it's important that
That
there's just space for like interesting conversation. Like again, dude, this isn't a news channel. This isn't
Yeah.
anything super we don't have a producer office. We don't have like fact checking
we're
everything.
just
I'm
two
sure,
dudes we're just two dudes who love to make conversation, and we just want to share what we feel and think with the world. And I really do feel like that's kind of a cool thing to do, and especially with what's happening nowadays, you know what I'm saying?
yeah, I think it's super cool. Like again, and that's why this is the third person view podcast. Everyone's gonna
Yeah.
I'm sure everyone at the start of this is the first episode, they were looking at this thing, they were like, what does the third person view mean, right?
Now you
Because it's
know.
literally,
You know what I'm
now
saying?
we're
Now
we're
you
just
know.
we're just looking we're just looking at this, and we're giving a perspective. We're just talking about it, and I think that's just great, man.
Yeah. All right. So it's thank you guys for your time. Honestly, if you made it this far, I'm
For sure.
surprised. All right. So
100%.
it's
We'll
Rohan and
see you
Prakar.
guys next episode.
Yeah. Rohan and Prakar signing off. Yeah.
Yep. See you.
See you guys.
To the masses, taking lashes from their masters. They screaming out. They yelling out, blood sacrifice, welcome to the afterlife. Niggas walking dead as they beg you to bring them back to life.